The corrupt attorneys thought they were bribing another pretty court clerk when everything went wrong. The stunning blonde they'd been treating like a servant for 6 months had just revealed her federal judge credentials and announced that their entire courthouse was under federal investigation. What they didn't know was that the beautiful clerk they'd been ignoring was actually Judge Alexandra Carter, and she'd been recording every illegal thing they'd done while building the most comprehensive corruption case in judicial history. Welcome to Silent Heroes Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. Now let me tell you how we got to this moment. 8 months earlier, the United States Department of Justice had received reports about systematic corruption in the Riverside County Superior Court that were so extensive they bordered on unbelievable. Judges selling verdicts, attorneys bribing court personnel, evidence disappearing from files, and witness testimony being altered before trials. The entire judicial system in one of California's largest counties had apparently been turned into a criminal enterprise. But the corruption was so sophisticated and so deeply embedded that traditional FBI investigations had failed to penetrate the network. Every time federal agents tried to gather evidence, they found themselves blocked by judges who ruled against search warrants, prosecutors who refused to file charges, and court personnel who claimed to know nothing about any irregularities. That's when Chief Judge Margaret Sullivan of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals made an unprecedented decision. She would send in a federal judge to conduct an undercover investigation from inside the corrupted system itself. Judge Alexandra Carter had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment of her judicial career. At 31, she was already the youngest federal judge in California history, a Harvard Law School graduate who had clerked for the Supreme Court before being appointed to the federal bench by the president himself. Her legal mind was considered one of the sharpest in the country, but what made her perfect for this assignment was something much simpler. She looked exactly like the kind of beautiful young woman that corrupt officials would dismiss as harmless decoration. The transformation had taken months of preparation. Alexandra had to learn not just how to be a court clerk, but how to be a court clerk convincing enough to handle real cases, while gathering evidence against some of the most dangerous legal criminals in the state. She studied under former clerks, learned the mannerisms of overworked court personnel, and perfected the appearance of someone who was beautiful but lacked the education or authority to threaten anyone's criminal enterprise. Most importantly, she had to convince everyone, including seasoned judges and experienced attorneys, that she was exactly what she appeared to be, a pretty young woman who had gotten her job through connections rather than competence, someone who could be intimidated, bribed, and ultimately controlled by people who mistook beauty for weakness. The morning that would end the largest judicial corruption ring in California history started like any other day at the Riverside County Superior Court. The courthouse buzzed with its usual activity, attorneys hurrying between hearings, defendants meeting with lawyers who promised outcomes they had already purchased, and the constant machinery of corrupted justice grinding forward one fixed case at a time. Alexandra Carter sat at the court clerk's desk in Department 12, processing paperwork with the efficient smile she had perfected over 6 months of deep cover work. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in the professional but approachable manner she had practiced. Her blue eyes focused on documents that everyone assumed contained routine administrative tasks. What they actually contained were detailed federal surveillance reports, audio transcripts of illegal conversations, and financial records showing the flow of bribe money through the courthouse. "Good morning, Lexi," came the familiar voice that had nauseated Alexandra for 6 months. Attorney Marcus Brennan approached her desk with the casual arrogance of someone who believed his money and connections made him untouchable. At 45, Brennan was everything Alexandra had been trained to despise about legal corruption: wealthy, entitled, and absolutely convinced that the law existed solely to serve his financial interests. Brennan's reputation in Riverside County was built on his ability to win cases for clients who should have been convicted. But what the legal community didn't know was that his success rate had nothing to do with legal skill. Brennan had spent the past 5 years building a network of corrupt judges, bribed court personnel, and intimidated witnesses that allowed him to guarantee outcomes before trials even began. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," Alexandra replied with the deferential smile she had used to hide her federal authority for months. To everyone watching, she looked like a court clerk grateful for attention from an important attorney. In reality, she was a federal judge documenting every aspect of his criminal conspiracy. "I need you to make sure Judge Patterson gets this file before my 10 a.m. hearing," Brennan said, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. "And Alexi, make sure he understands that our mutual friend appreciates his flexibility in these difficult cases." The envelope contained more than legal documents. Alexandra's training had taught her to recognize the subtle weight difference that indicated cash payments. Brennan was openly bribing Judge Patterson through her, using the beautiful court clerk as an intermediary because he assumed she was too naive to understand the implications of what she was carrying. "Of course, Mr. Brennan," Alexandra said, accepting the envelope with the innocent smile that had convinced dozens of corrupt officials to trust her with their crimes. "Judge Patterson always appreciates your consideration." What Brennan didn't know was that Alexandra's desk contained federal recording equipment that had just captured him offering a bribe to a sitting judge. More importantly, he had no idea that the naive court clerk he was using as a go-between was actually gathering evidence for a federal prosecution that would destroy his career and send him to prison. The morning proceeded exactly as Alexandra had predicted, based on 6 months of observation. Brennan's case involved a wealthy businessman accused of tax evasion, charges that should have resulted in conviction based on overwhelming IRS evidence. But Judge Patterson, who had been receiving regular payments through Alexandra's delivery service, was prepared to rule in favor of the defense, despite the evidence. Alexandra watched the proceeding with the professional detachment she had developed through months of observing judicial corruption. To everyone in the courtroom, she appeared to be a court clerk taking routine notes. In reality, she was a federal judge documenting systematic violations of federal law that would eventually trigger the largest corruption prosecution in California history. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said during opening statements, "the evidence will show that Mr. Castellano deliberately concealed income, falsified tax documents, and engaged in a systematic pattern of federal tax evasion." Judge Patterson nodded with false solemnity, playing the role of an impartial judge while actually following a script he had been paid to perform. "Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Brennan, your opening statement?" Brennan rose with the confidence of someone who knew the outcome had already been purchased. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case is built on speculation and misinterpretation. My client is an honest businessman who has been targeted by overzealous federal agents." Alexandra took careful notes, documenting not just the legal arguments, but the subtle signals between Brennan and Judge Patterson that indicated their conspiracy was proceeding as planned. Every gesture, every ruling, every procedural decision was being recorded for federal prosecutors who would eventually present this evidence to a jury. During the first recess, Brennan approached Alexandra's desk with an envelope significantly thicker than the morning's bribe. "Lexi, sweetheart, Judge Patterson mentioned he might need some additional research assistance for this afternoon's ruling. Could you make sure he gets this research material before court resumes?" Alexandra accepted the envelope with appropriate gratitude, understanding that she had just been handed evidence of a mid-trial bribe designed to ensure a specific verdict. "Of course, Mr. Brennan. I'll make sure the judge gets everything he needs for his research." "You're such a doll, Lexi," Brennan said, with the patronizing tone he used for people he considered intellectually inferior. I don't know what this courthouse would do without pretty girls like you keeping everything organized." The condescension was calculated and deliberate. Brennan had learned that treating court personnel like servants made them more compliant with his requests, and Alexandra's beauty made her an ideal target for his manipulative charm. What he didn't understand was that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to federal agents who were building an airtight case against him. Alexandra delivered the bribe to Judge Patterson during the recess, playing her role as an unknowing messenger while actually gathering evidence of judicial corruption. "Mr. Brennan asked me to give you this research material for this afternoon's session, Your Honor." Judge Patterson accepted the envelope without comment, his practiced indifference hiding the fact that he was receiving payment for a predetermined verdict. "Thank you, Ms. Carter. Please tell Mr. Brennan that I appreciate his thoroughness in preparing for these proceedings." The afternoon session proceeded exactly as the bribe had intended. Despite overwhelming evidence of tax evasion, Judge Patterson ruled in favor of Brennan's client, dismissing charges that should have resulted in federal conviction. The prosecutor's objections were overruled, evidence was deemed inadmissible, and witness testimony was discredited through rulings that defied legal precedent. Alexandra documented every corrupt decision while maintaining her facade as a clerk, simply recording court proceedings. But internally, she was conducting the kind of legal analysis that had made her the youngest federal judge in California history. Patterson's rulings weren't just wrong. They were systematically designed to obstruct justice while maintaining plausible deniability. After the dismissal, Brennan approached Alexandra's desk with the satisfied expression of someone who had successfully purchased justice. "Lexi, you've been such a big help today. I think you deserve a little something for your assistance." He placed a small envelope on her desk, a tip for services rendered, treating the beautiful court clerk like a waitress who had provided good customer service. "Why don't you take your boyfriend out for a nice dinner? A pretty girl like you shouldn't have to worry about money." Alexandra accepted the payment with appropriate surprise and gratitude, understanding that Brennan had just provided evidence of his systematic bribery of court personnel. "Thank you so much, Mr. Brennan. You're so generous." "Just keep being helpful, sweetheart," Brennan replied. "Pretty girls who know how to keep their mouths shut can do very well in this business." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Brennan was reminding Alexandra that her continued employment, and possibly her safety, depended on her silence about the corruption she was witnessing. What he didn't know was that her real employment was as a federal judge with the full protection of the United States government. The pattern continued for weeks. Brennan and other corrupt attorneys used Alexandra as their messenger, believing they had found the perfect intermediary, beautiful enough to charm judges, naive enough to trust, and financially dependent enough to ensure her silence. They paid her for services, confided their strategies, and gradually drew her deeper into their criminal enterprise. But each interaction was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment, every bribe was being documented by federal agents, and every corrupt decision was being analyzed by prosecutors who were building the most comprehensive judicial corruption case in California history. The network was more extensive than Alexandra had initially suspected. Judge Patterson was just one of 7 judges receiving regular payments. Court clerks were altering records, bailiffs were intimidating witnesses, and even court reporters were falsifying transcripts to support predetermined outcomes. Alexandra's position as a trusted courier gave her access to the entire criminal organization. Attorneys who would never discuss their crimes with federal agents spoke freely in front of the beautiful clerk they assumed was harmless. Judges who carefully concealed their corruption from investigators openly discussed their schemes with someone they believed was just another corrupted employee. The most damning evidence came during a private meeting in Judge Patterson's chambers, where Alexandra was delivering what she had been told was case research, but was actually a substantial cash payment. Patterson, Brennan, and 2 other attorneys were discussing their most ambitious scheme yet, fixing a murder trial where the defendant had paid over $500,000 to guarantee acquittal. "The prosecution's case is solid," Patterson said, counting the money Alexandra had delivered. "We'll need to be creative with evidence admissibility and jury instruction." "I've already spoken to 3 potential jurors," Brennan replied. 2 are willing to be reasonable for the right consideration. The 3rd might need more persuasion." Alexandra stood quietly by the door, apparently waiting for instructions while actually recording every word of their conspiracy to obstruct justice in a capital murder case. The conversation revealed not just corruption, but the specific methods they used to ensure predetermined outcomes in the most serious criminal cases. "What about the court reporter?" asked Attorney Martinez, another member of the conspiracy. "Can she be trusted to adjust any problematic testimony?" "Already handled," Patterson replied. "Ms. Rodriguez understands that accurate transcription sometimes requires editorial discretion." The scope of the corruption was breathtaking. They weren't just fixing minor cases. They were systematically obstructing justice in felony trials, ensuring that dangerous criminals remained free, while innocent defendants were convicted based on false evidence. Alexandra's federal training had prepared her for extensive corruption, but the casual way these legal professionals discussed destroying lives for money was more disturbing than anything she had anticipated. They spoke about manipulating murder trials with the same tone they might use to discuss dinner plans. "Lexi," Patterson said, finally acknowledging her presence, "you've been very helpful with our research projects. I hope you understand how important it is to keep our academic discussions confidential." "Of course, Your Honor," Alexandra replied with the innocent smile that had convinced them she was harmless. "I would never discuss your private research with anyone." "Good girl," Brennan added patronizingly. "Pretty girls who know how to keep secrets can have very successful careers in the legal field." The double meaning was clear. Alexandra's continued success, and possibly her safety, depended on her silence about their criminal activities. They were offering her inclusion in their conspiracy, while simultaneously threatening her if she refused to participate. Alexandra nodded with apparent gratitude, playing the role of a naive young woman grateful for the attention and financial rewards of powerful men. But she was actually calculating the federal charges each participant would face: conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, racketeering, and in the case of the murder trial, accessory to potential future crimes. The investigation reached its climax when Alexandra was asked to participate directly in evidence tampering. Brennan needed court records altered to remove exculpatory evidence in a felony assault case, and he wanted Alexandra to handle the document modification personally. "Lexi, I need you to do me a very special favor," Brennan said, approaching her desk with documents and a substantial cash payment. "These files need some minor corrections before they're submitted to the appellate court. Nothing major, just removing some irrelevant information that might confuse the appeals judges." Alexandra looked at the documents and immediately recognized what Brennan was asking her to do: destroy evidence that would exonerate the defendant and expose the corruption that had led to his conviction. He was asking her to become a direct participant in the obstruction of justice. "I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Brennan," she said with convincing confusion. "What kind of corrections do you need?" "Just remove these witness statements," Brennan explained, indicating documents that proved the defendant's innocence. "They're not really relevant to the case, and they might give the appeals court the wrong impression about the thoroughness of the original investigation." He was asking her to destroy evidence while making it sound like routine administrative work. The request was so blatantly criminal that it provided perfect evidence of the conspiracy's methods and Alexandra's forced participation. "I don't know if I should be making changes to official court documents," Alexandra said hesitantly, playing the role of someone who was nervous but could be convinced. "Lexi, sweetheart," Brennan said with false paternal kindness, "you've been such a good team player. We've all noticed how helpful you've been, and there could be significant opportunities for someone with your talents. But sometimes being part of the team means being willing to help with the complicated aspects of legal practice." The offer was clear. Join their conspiracy completely and receive substantial financial rewards, or refuse and face potential retaliation. Alexandra was being forced to choose between becoming a criminal participant or risking exposure as a federal investigator. "I want to help," Alexandra said with convincing uncertainty. "But I'm worried about getting in trouble if anyone notices the changes." "Nobody will notice," Brennan assured her. "And even if they did, these are just minor administrative corrections. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just helping ensure that the appellate process focuses on the relevant legal issues." He was coaching her to rationalize the evidence tampering, providing language she could use to justify her participation in criminal activity. The conversation was providing federal prosecutors with evidence of how the conspiracy recruited new participants and maintained their psychological control over corrupted personnel. Alexandra accepted the documents and the payment, understanding that she had just been handed evidence of the most serious federal crimes imaginable. "I'll take care of these corrections right away, Mr. Brennan." "That's my girl," Brennan said with satisfaction. "I knew we could count on you to be part of the team." As soon as Brennan left, Alexandra activated the secure communication device hidden in her desk and sent a coded message to federal agents. "Package complete. Ready for delivery." The response came back immediately. "Delivery scheduled for tomorrow morning. Prepare for extraction." Alexandra spent her final evening as a court clerk documenting the evidence she had gathered and preparing for the federal operation that would destroy the largest judicial corruption ring in California history. 6 months of careful investigation had provided prosecutors with enough evidence to guarantee convictions for dozens of corrupt officials. The next morning began normally, with Alexandra processing paperwork and greeting attorneys who had no idea they were about to be arrested by federal agents. Brennan arrived early, apparently pleased with Alexandra's willingness to participate in evidence tampering. "Good morning, Lexi," he said cheerfully. "I trust those document corrections went smoothly?" "Everything's taken care of, Mr. Brennan," Alexandra replied with the innocent smile that had hidden her federal authority for 6 months. "Excellent. You know, Lexi, I think you have real potential in the legal field. Have you ever considered law school? With the right connections, a smart, beautiful woman like you could have a very successful legal career." The irony was almost unbearable. Brennan was encouraging the federal judge, who was about to destroy his career, to consider pursuing legal education. Alexandra managed to maintain her expression of grateful interest while internally marveling at the magnitude of his ignorance. "That's so kind of you to say, Mr. Brennan. I've always thought about studying law, but I never imagined I was smart enough for law school." "Intelligence is overrated," Brennan replied with the casual sexism that had characterized all his interactions with her. "In the legal profession, success comes from understanding how the system really works and knowing the right people. Academic achievement is less important than practical knowledge." He was describing the corruption that had defined his career while offering to mentor the federal judge who was about to end it. The conversation provided perfect evidence of how corrupt attorneys recruited new participants by offering access to their criminal networks. At exactly 9:15 a.m., the federal operation began. Alexandra heard the distinctive sound of multiple vehicles arriving simultaneously in the courthouse parking lot, followed by the organized footsteps of federal agents entering the building. The sound was subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice, but Alexandra's training allowed her to recognize the acoustic signature of a major federal law enforcement operation. Brennan was still discussing Alexandra's potential legal career when the courtroom doors opened with quiet authority. Federal agents in tactical gear entered first, followed by FBI investigators whose presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the courthouse. But it was the final figure who made everyone in the courthouse understand that their world was about to change forever. Chief Judge Margaret Sullivan of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals walked into the courtroom with the bearing of someone whose authority superseded every official in the building. Brennan looked up from his conversation with Alexandra, his expression shifting from friendly confidence to confused concern. "What's going on? Who are these people?" Alexandra stood slowly from her desk, her movements suddenly revealing the judicial bearing she had been hiding for 6 months. For the first time, Brennan saw her as she really was, confident, intelligent, and absolutely in control of the situation. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice taking on the authority that had made her the youngest federal judge in California history, "I think it's time we discussed your legal career from a different perspective." She reached into her desk and withdrew a leather folder that she handed to Chief Judge Sullivan. "Your Honor, I'm submitting the complete evidentiary record of my investigation into systematic corruption within the Riverside County Superior Court system." Brennan's face went white as he began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. Who are you?" "I am Judge Alexandra Carter, United States District Court for the Central District of California," she replied with the calm authority of federal judicial power. "And you, Mr. Brennan, are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal racketeering statutes." The beautiful court clerk he had been patronizing for 6 months had just revealed herself as a federal judge, with the authority to destroy his life. The naive girl he had used as a courier for his bribes was actually the architect of his destruction. Federal agents moved through the courthouse with military precision, executing arrest warrants for judges, attorneys, court personnel, and administrative staff who had participated in the corruption conspiracy. The network that had taken years to build was dismantled in minutes by federal agents who had been planning this operation for months. Judge Patterson was arrested in his chambers while counting bribe money. Attorney Martinez was taken into custody while attempting to destroy documents. Court reporter Rodriguez was arrested while trying to flee through a back exit. The entire criminal organization was rounded up simultaneously, preventing anyone from escaping or destroying evidence. Brennan stared at Alexandra with a mixture of terror and grudging admiration. You're really a federal judge?" "I am," Alexandra confirmed. "And for the past 6 months, I've been documenting every crime you've committed, every bribe you've offered, and every case you've fixed through corruption." "This is entrapment," Brennan protested desperately. "You can't do this." "Mr. Brennan," Chief Judge Sullivan said with the authority of the federal judiciary, "Judge Carter was conducting a legitimate federal investigation into corruption that was destroying the integrity of the judicial system. Every action she took was authorized by federal court orders and conducted under the supervision of the Department of Justice." Alexandra turned to address the stunned courthouse personnel who had gathered to witness the arrests. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 6 months, I have been conducting an undercover investigation into systematic corruption within this judicial district. The evidence we have gathered will be used to prosecute dozens of officials who betrayed their oaths and corrupted the administration of justice." The beautiful court clerk they had all assumed was just another pretty face had revealed herself as a federal judge who had systematically destroyed the largest judicial corruption ring in California history. And Marcus Brennan's career in legal crime had come to an end at the hands of someone he had never bothered to treat with the respect she deserved. Oh, what they didn't know about Judge Alexandra Carter could have filled multiple federal case files. But what everyone learned that day was that assumptions based on appearance and gender were not just wrong, they were dangerous. The beautiful young woman they had dismissed as harmless decoration had been hunting them with federal authority, surveillance equipment, and the full power of the United States government. The pretty court clerk they had ignored had reminded everyone that sometimes the most dangerous people in any room are the ones everyone chooses to underestimate.